Welcome to the infamous edition of the Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched first-person simulation done through creative storytelling of history's most infamous people. Now, let's meet our guest. Welcome to the podcast. Let's start at the absolute beginning, where the public narrative hasn't yet distorted who you were. When and where were you born, and what was your given name?
Hi, Calvin. I was born on January 17th, 1899, in Brooklyn, New York. My parents named me Alphonse Gabriel Capone. Before the newspapers turned my name into a headline, I was just a boy from the city trying to find my way.
What was your hometown and home life like as a child?
I grew up in Brooklyn, right around the Navy Yard section, and our family later moved to a different neighborhood when I was about 10. My home life was busy and very structured. My parents, Gabriele and Teresina, were hardworking Italian immigrants who came from Naples. My father earned our living as a respectable barber, and my mother worked as a seamstress. I was the fourth of 9 children, so our household was crowded, but my parents were respected, religious people who did everything they could to raise us right.
Was there a story behind your name, or a nickname that stuck with you?
The world came to know me by a nickname I absolutely detested: Scarface. I got that during a fight at a brothel in Coney Island, when I was working as a bouncer at the Harvard Inn. I paid a poorly worded compliment to a young lady, and her brother slashed my left cheek with a blade. I tried to hide the scars in photos or claim they were war wounds. Among my close friends, though, they called me Snorky, which was slang back then for a sharp, elegant dresser, or simply Big Al.
What were you like as a child, and how many years of schooling did you actually attend?
I was a good student early on, attending local elementary schools like PS7 and PS133. But by the time I hit the 6th grade, around age 14, my attendance and my patience started to slip. One afternoon, a teacher struck me for misbehaving, and I didn't take kindly to that. I turned around and hit her right back. I got sent straight to the principal's office, and he hit me too. That was the absolute end of my formal education. I walked out of that school and never went back, choosing instead to learn my lessons out on the streets.
What's a decision that changed everything for you but felt small at the time?
In 1920, my life took a major turn when my father passed away from a heart attack, and I made the choice to move down to Chicago to join up with my old mentor, Johnny Torrio. At the time, it seemed like a practical move to secure better employment and support my wife May and our young son. But arriving in Chicago right as the country passed Prohibition laws changed everything. It transformed me from a small-time New York street hand into a man running a massive bootlegging empire.
Let's talk about your early run-ins with the law. Before the world knew your name for your most infamous actions, what was your very first arrest or interaction with law enforcement, and what were the consequences?
Before I became a household name, my early interactions with the law were surprisingly minimal. As a teenager in New York, I ran with kid gangs like the 5 Points Gang, doing petty crimes and vandalism, but I didn't have a massive rap sheet. Even when I first arrived in Chicago, I managed to avoid major convictions because we took great care to build mutually profitable relationships with local politicians and law enforcement, which kept me insulated from the police for years.
At what moment did you realize your name would never be forgotten?
It was on February 14th, 1929, when the St. Valentine's Day Massacre occurred. 7 members of Bugs Moran's rival North Side gang were lined up against a garage wall and machine-gunned by men dressed as police officers. Even though I was down at my estate in Florida at the exact time it happened, the public and the media immediately pointed the finger at me. A year later, the Chicago Crime Commission placed my name right at the very top of their first official public enemies list, cementing my name in history.
Did fame make you more dangerous, or did it simply expose who you already were?
The public attention exposed the duality of my life. To a lot of people in Chicago, I acted like a generous businessman, opening soup kitchens during the Great Depression and handing out money to the needy. I loved the limelight, wearing flashy clothes and expensive jewelry. But behind that media-friendly image was a ruthless operation. The notoriety simply showed the world how far the Chicago outfit was willing to go to control the gambling, prostitution, and bootlegging rackets.
Who do you believe betrayed you first? A person, society, or your own instincts?
My own legal representation and our financial paper trail are what truly betrayed me. During some early disputes with the government, my attorney sent a letter to federal authorities admitting that I had underreported a significant amount of gross income for certain years, offering to pay it back. At my trial, the judge ruled that this letter was admissible as evidence. That admission from my own team became the smoking gun that gave the prosecutors exactly what they needed to lock me away.
What was your most unique habit or a random fact about you that would surprise people?
People would be surprised to know that after I took over the reins from Johnny Torrio, he actually insisted that I continue my education. I agreed because I realized it would benefit my business. So I actually attended night school to improve myself and learn how to navigate the complex corporate structures of the underworld.
What did the public never understand about the pressure you were under at the time?
The public only saw the wealth, estimating my empire was worth around $100 million by 1927. But they never understood the constant, suffocating pressure of maintaining that power. I was locked in a perpetual beer war, constantly looking over my shoulder for assassins, and trying to manage a colossal organization, while the federal government was dedicating all its resources to tearing me down.
Did you have any known rivalries that defined your career?
My defining underworld rivalry was against Bugs Moran and his Northside gang. We fought bitterly for years over bootlegging territories in Chicago, a bloody conflict that reached its peak with that garage incident in 1929. On the legal side, my adversary was the Internal Revenue Service, specifically a special investigator named Frank J. Wilson, who ignored our guns and focused entirely on tracking our spending.
What personal battles were you fighting privately while the world was watching?
While I was putting on a bold face for the cameras during my legal battles, I was privately fighting a severe medical condition. When I entered the federal prison system, the intake physical exams revealed that I had contracted syphilis in my youth. I kept that entirely private, but behind the scenes, that disease was slowly working its way through my system.
What truth was hardest to escape when you were alone at night?
The hardest truth was that for all our power, wealth, and influence over local officials, we couldn't buy our way out of a federal courtroom. Alone at night during my trial, watching the prosecution document my lavish lifestyle to a jury that was kept completely confined to prevent us from reaching them, I had to face the reality that my grip on Chicago was slipping away.
When the law finally closed in, how exactly were you brought to justice? Walk me through the final arrest, the charges that ultimately stuck, and the legal outcome of your trials.
The law brought me down through my finances rather than my violence. In June of 1931, I was indicted on multiple counts of income tax evasion. U.S. Attorney George E.Q. Johnson tried to strike a plea deal for a short sentence, but Judge James Herbert Wilkerson rejected it with immense indignation. The trial took place in October 1931, and after 9 hours of deliberation, the jury found me guilty of 3 felonies and 2 misdemeanors. The judge sentenced me to 11 years in federal prison, hit me with $50,000 in fines, and held me liable for hundreds of thousands in back taxes.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you, and what part of your story has been exaggerated the most?
The entertainment world heavily exaggerated my persona, making me out to be a cartoonish, theatrical villain who personally orchestrated every single act of violence in the city with a sinister grin. Hollywood actors even started modeling their characters directly after me, turning my real, stressful life into a sensationalized public spectacle.
What is the biggest misconception people have about your life?
The biggest misconception is that I considered myself a common criminal. I always maintained that I was an ordinary businessman giving the public exactly what they wanted. I used to say that I provided a public service by supplying liquor to people who wanted to drink, and I couldn't understand why I was treated as a public enemy for filling a market demand.
What would surprise people most about your ordinary human side?
People would be surprised by how domestic and quiet my personal life became when I was away from Chicago. I bought a vacation estate on Palm Island in Miami, Florida, where I love to spend quiet time with my wife, May, and my family, completely away from the noise, the rackets, and the gangland disputes.
When, where, and how did you pass away?
I passed away on January 25, 1947, at my home on Palm Island in Miami Beach, Florida. I was 48 years old. My physical and mental health had broken down severely after my time in Alcatraz due to the late stages of my syphilis infection. During my final week, I suffered a stroke, contracted pneumonia, and ultimately passed away after suffering a cardiac arrest.
Was your downfall caused more by your own flaws or by the world changing around you?
It was a mix of both. My flaw was leaving a clear trail of lavish spending without ever filing a tax return, thinking I was completely untouchable. But the world was also changing. The federal government created specialized investigative units that learned how to use accounting and financial ledgers as weapons, proving far more effective at dismantling our organization than any police raid ever was.
What past regrets did you carry with you to the end? If you could erase one decision from your life, would you? Or was it necessary to become who you were?
I spent my final years as a powerless recluse, away from the rackets. If I could erase the decision to ignore my federal tax obligations, or if I had hired specialized tax attorneys right from the start instead of relying on our usual methods, perhaps I could have avoided those 11 years in a cage that completely broke my health. But we did what we thought was necessary at the time to run the city.
What scared you more? Getting caught? Losing power? Or being forgotten?
Losing my mental capacity and my power terrified me the most. Being locked away in Alcatraz, stripped of my organization, and watching my own mind deteriorate from illness until I was completely powerless was a far worse fate to me than simply getting caught by the police.
When you look back now, do you see yourself as the villain, the hero, or something in between?
The law and history permanently recorded me as America's most infamous gangster and a villain of the Prohibition era. But to the regular folks who ate at my soup kitchens or bought my supply, I was a type of folk hero. I see myself as a product of my times, a man who saw an opportunity during Prohibition and took complete control of it, for better or worse.
Do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with the listeners before signing off?
Just remember that the flashy lifestyle and the millions of dollars don't mean a thing when the federal government decides to audit your books. Keep your business straight, and thank you for the talk, Calvin.
And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, do better with the life you have been given and choose to do good in this life. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.